We're back, people, and today we got another video going over why I think positional flexibility is so important to the Miami Dolphins. In general, I think Weaver and McDaniel value it a lot. And I think based on this offseason, you can see why positional flexibility, versatility in general, is just an important trait that they look for. And honestly, I think it's just become kind of underrated league-wide. It's been one of those things where people like almost use versatility as like a negative thing, which I don't understand. Because usually when you're talking about your versatility, you're talking about a player that is very good at their one spot, at least, that's how you're kind of breaking it down. But you're looking at guys that can add value in different ways, whether it's, you suffer from injuries, in the secondary, you're kind of like coverage rotations. It helps open up the playbook at a few different spots. So, leave a like, comment on the video. It helps out with all, the YouTube algorithm stuff. So I think starting we can start defensively, there's a lot of spots to look at. And there's certain positions that you wish they had more positional flexibility that we can go over towards the end. But starting offensively, I think looking at the O-line kind of off rip, the Dolphins fell off last season once Austin Jackson went down with injury, running the ball. They had nothing to go with there. And I think that's a big reason you saw the Dolphins trade up for a player like Jonah Savianaya, because they needed guard help. He fit in with what they were doing, but that added bonus of positional flexibility where he can bump out from guard to right tackle if needed, because tackle is more important in the Dolphins system. So if Austin Jackson were to go down with injury, they have that option to then bump out a guy like Jonah because he has that experience. He's someone that could actually play it. They didn't really have anyone that could do that type of thing in the run game after he went down. That's just a huge bonus. Then you have other spots where you want guys on the offensive line. They value guys. Even that's why they value guys like Liam Eichenberg. I know, Liam, you don't want him starting. But as an end of the roster guy, that's why he ends up making a roster, is because he has the flexibility to play both guard spot, play center. That's not one I'm too happy about, but it is another reason why they do value that positional flexibility. Because then you have someone like Andrew Meyer who makes a roster, but he's really a center only player. That's going to limit him as well from if someone shows up that can play center just as well as him, but then also has guard flexibility, he's going to get bumped out for a player like that because it's so valuable to Miami. On offense, they have a few other people that have great positional flexibility. I mean, Achane literally is probably the best receiving back in the league. It gives him such huge bonus in Dolphins offense. McDaniels loves utilizing him in so many different ways as a receiver. And he's become one of the best players in Miami because of that flexibility. Defensively, I think this is where you can really stand out, really shine from a positional flexibility standpoint. You go on the D line, you look at last year, Zach Sealer, Calais Campbell. They were able to play every spot, and this is not just about you can play two different positions on the defense. You can play D tackle and edge, which Sealer and Calais could do a little bit. They could also play edge. It's about playing every different technique as well. You can play from 0 out to 5, which is so important in the Dolphins system. It allows you to run a bunch of different fronts, which then gives the offense it makes you a lot more unpredictable, which the Dolphins love to run a bunch of different stunts. So having guys like Sealer, they bring in Kenneth Grant, which people kind of, put Kenneth Grant as a player that can only play nose, only one tech. That's not true at all, in my opinion. He's going to play every spot. They value that because he has the athleticism too. He has experience playing a little bit farther outside. Maybe not as much as Calais, but Calais is kind of a freak from that standpoint. But Sealer, Kenneth Grant, it's why they're going to be so good is because they can, be guys that can play different spots. They both can be crash and loop guys on stunts, lined up from multiple different alignments. It just makes you a lot more unpredictable on the defensive front. Even at edge, your edge don't have crazy versatility, but with your top 3 guys, they all have experience and success lining up on interior, more interior reps and obvious pass rush situations, which then will allow you to have all 3 guys on the field and allow you to mix match them in certain situations. It also allows you to take advantage of mismatches in certain games. If you have if the worst offensive lineman is, say, a guard, and you want to get your best player on that person, and his weakness is athleticism, you want to get a guy like Chop lined up on him in great situations. You can do that because he's capable of that in those pass rush situations. So that is something that I think is another bonus that they really value, especially on the defensive line. Linebacker, not so much. You don't really have the versatility. They actually kind of went the opposite with the linebacker position, funnily enough. They added guys, Brooks has, some flexibility, but the guys they all added are kind of master of one thing and kind of struggle at a lot of the other stuff. So they all kind of like play into their weaknesses. So that was kind of interesting. I think they probably wish they could add a guy that was kind of an all around player, but that's not where they are. Secondary wise, you look at the safety room, they clearly value flexibility. I think they want more flexibility at the corner position. But if you see what they do on coverage rotations, where like last year, you know how many times Kohu from the nickel dropped to deep half safety? They love to do those Tampa 2 inverse stuff where Kohu from nickel drops to deep half. Someone that is comfortable doing that. That's why having a guy like bringing in Melifonwu, who is a safety, has that experience in safety, but can also play as a nickel. He can be a guy that ends up doing those conversions. And the Dolphins brought a guy in like Melifonwu because you go back and look at Weaver's time with the Ravens. Look at Kyle Hamilton. Look at everything he's asked to do. He literally plays all over the defense. He's just so valuable with how they're able to run all of these different coverages, all of these different rotations that they do, all of these just different defensive calls. And Hamilton can play so many different roles. It makes it so hard for the quarterback to get a key. And that's why, the Dolphins have been trying to add those versatile players. They drafted Dante Trader, who I think has some versatility. You want guys who are smart too, like versatility in terms of like you can play a few different spots and then rotate out, rotate in, just be from a different alignment. And then that corner, I think they wish they had a little more versatility, but they do have some, like Kohu can play inside and outside, and that's kind of why he is going to be your sort of number one guy with Ramsey leaving. They valued Ramsey a lot too, and Ramsey has crazy versatility. He's leaving not because of his play. It's more of, the potential off-field things with McDaniel or whatever. But clearly, they value some versatility. It opens up playbooks on both sides of the ball. It gives Weaver a lot more flexibility with what he wants to call with that type of personnel on the field. Same with McDaniel. Just having guys like, it also helps with the injury. Injury's been the biggest problem with the Dolphins in general. Having guys that can play multiple spots. So say, you get some corner injuries and you don't really have a guy you trust as a nickel, you could really go out there and play 3 safety sets and have Melifonwu play as a nickel like in a full game. And have, the other 2 safeties plays like true safeties. And that would also offer versatility in the sense of like, hey, play calls, we can maybe use a little more of those rotating nickel to safety calls. Have the other guy rotate down, rock and roll those guys in a bunch of different ways. And it's a very fun to see that usage. I've always been a fan of adding versatile and flexible players. And like, I don't mean that like just adding people just because they're versatile. If that's just their main calling card, yeah, they can find some struggles. But like, I'm adding usually when I'm talking about a guy that's versatile and it's a guy that I like, they're not bad because they're versatile. Like usually I like them because they are good at what they do, but they also have that versatile element where, there's also different things where like, yeah, we're talking about positional flexibility a lot, but there's guys that are versatile in different ways where like, it's not about where they're aligned. They're versatile. They can make plays in a bunch of different ways. It could be a linebacker that's really good at blitzing, also really good dropping into coverage to make plays first to run, but they all do it. They do it from all one spot. Like Jordan Brooks, he's versatile in the sense like, yeah, he's playing pretty much the same spot, like off-ball linebacker, Mike. Well, nothing too crazy in terms of where he's aligned, but he can make plays in all different facets of the game, have that sort of extra versatility. Like him as a blitzer, it's always a nice bonus. If he was just a blitzer, then yeah, then you turn into a player that's more like a Willie Gay, but he's a guy that's very good at reading the run. He can do some stuff in coverage as well, has some inconsistency there at time, but definitely has the flashes. But then the blitzing ability, you can send him. Great bonus to have in certain situations. So that's, I think a big reason why I think, positional flexibility is important to Miami. It's clearly something like if you look at a lot of stuff, they bring in, even at receiver, we haven't talked about a ton of it, but having guys that can just play Y, Z, X, Y's a tight end spot, but like having guys like that can play as like, a slot X, Z, bringing in a guy like Nick Westbrook-Akina that has that like big slot ability, but it also line up on the outside. He can get down in and be involved in the blocks. That's a versatile element. That's why I think I don't like the tight end room because, Jonnu's a good player, but Jonnu's very good at what he does as a big slot receiver, uses receiver, but he doesn't really have any flexibility to his game. Same with Pharaoh Brown and Julian Hill, lack of flexibility. And that's why I'm not super high on the tight end room. I think you can use Jonnu still at the same way. And I think Jonnu will do that at a very high level. But there are certain ways when he is on the field, it does limit you from a run game perspective. And then those other guys, they limit you from a pass game perspective, because they can only really do one thing. And then, the other guys are also not even that great as blockers. That's why I've wanted a tight end that's really good all around because I think that would bring so much value. I'm looking for more positional flexibility at that position, linebacker. I think that would help both sides of the ball a ton. But that's more of a future year down the line type thing that you're looking at. So if you guys enjoyed, like, comment, and subscribe.